Hello everyone, hope you're all safe and well. Welcome to this program, Read Your Bible Through in a Year. Today we are on day 38. So before we go into today's reading, the usual reminders: if you have not subscribed for this channel, please do subscribe. As I can see, more and more people are subscribing to this channel, which is very encouraging. And also don't forget to share this link with your friends and family so they will be blessed as well. And also the bell icon, so that you will get your reminders and notifications. If you have missed the previous days or the earlier days meditations or the explanation, you have always a link on the right hand top corner of your YouTube screen, so you can always go back and listen. But I would recommend you to follow this reading every day, which will be a real blessing. So thank you very much. The subscribers are increasing, and also the comments are getting us, which is very encouraging. So let's not stay longer, because today we are having quite long discussions to do. And we are successfully entering into the third book in the Old Testament, called the Leviticus. This is a very important book in the Bible. The Genesis, we saw about the patriarchs, Abraham, about Adam and Eve. We saw about Noah, we saw about Abraham, we read about Isaac, we read about Jacob and everyone, and that led to Exodus, where we saw about the patriarch Moses. So how he led the people of Israel and from Egypt, how they came to Mount Sinai and where they got the commandments, and now they have built the tabernacle. Now the next important thing we are going to concentrate is the book of Leviticus. In the Greek, the first word of this book translates as "and he called." So that's the Hebrew name of the book. And also the name Leviticus is such because this book contains the rules and the regulations and the commandments and the procedures given especially to Leviticus. This gives the importance of how the Levites, the family, the tribe of Levi, were given the in charge to go into the presence. No one else are allowed to go other than Levites. You will later read in Second Chronicles, etc. How important these people are, the Levites. They are the only people who can go into the presence of God. So I've just read to you the third book of Moses is a primer for the moral, ethnical instructions of the nations of Israel. So it's the instructions that they have to do, containing the civil, sanitary, ceremonial, moral, religious regulations from God's chosen people. So this now the Israel has become the God's chosen people. Now they have to follow certain laws and regulations. So the book of Leviticus gives them these instructions. All the offerings, ceremonies and laws served to constantly remind Israel that God was eminently holy. So this book constantly reminds them that this book is very important and God is eminently holy. He could be approached only by the priests, so not anyone else can approach him. They can be approached only by the priests, and they have to follow strict obedience, okay, and detailed instructions for purifications. Not anyone can do that. So God in this book actually speaks face to face with Moses. I will tell you in a short while. So he could be approached only by the priests. God can be approached only by the priests, and then only in the strict obedience to the detailed instructions of purifications for everything. There is a systematic purifications and the details are given. God required the sacrifice of the innocent animals to cover man's sin, not anything. So you will read right from the burnt offering from chapter 1 onwards, every offering that has to be innocent and without blemish. Now this sacrifice is a symbolic of ultimate sacrifice of Jesus Christ, which can take away the sins of man, as we read in John chapter 1:29. So this is the whole thing about this book of Leviticus. You will see lots of regulations, lots of rules on each of the sacrifices, when a sacrifice has to be given, about the sanitization, about the ceremonies, the morale, everything is given in detail. We also know the book of Leviticus emphasizes the fact that God spoke directly to Moses. He did not speak to through prophets or others, but God spoke to Moses directly, because the fact is recorded that almost 50 times in this book it mentions God spoke to Moses. The Lord called to Moses, like so similar thing. So it is mentioned almost 50 times. So what I want you to do is today we will be reading chapter 1, 2 and 3 from the book of Leviticus, and in the Gospel according to Matthew we will be reading chapter 24 verses 1 through to 28. Again, the Gospel of Matthew today, what we are going to read is very, very important and very much connected to this Leviticus as well. So read through the chapters 1, 2 and 3. Some people find it's really dry because there are lots of ceremonial things that's happening, what needs to be done, and how the bull has to be slaughtered, for example, how the grain offering had to be done. All those things are there. So in the first chapter you will be reading about the burnt offering, how they have to be done, and the second chapter you will be reading about the grain offering, and in the third chapter you will be reading about the fellowship offering. So these are the three things, first three offerings, how they are prepared, etc. So now let's go to the New Testament, Gospel according to Matthew chapter 24 verses 1 through to 28. Now this is a very, very important chapter that everyone needs to know, because this chapter is again a response to Jesus or answer by Jesus to one of the disciples' questions. Yesterday we saw in chapter 23, Matthew chapter 23, he gives 7 woes to Jews, and especially we saw in verses 35, and so upon you will come all the righteous blood that has been shed on the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah son of Berechiah. So son of Berechiah, so that is a reference, because the Old Testament, the murder of Abel is recorded in, everyone knows, Genesis chapter 4:8, and that Zechariah is described in 2 Chronicles chapter 24 verses 20 to 22. So when Jehoiada is another, so where Jehoiada is another name for Berechiah. So Zechariah is the son of Jehoiada who wants the king, and he kills them. So even that innocent blood will be taken. So as you know, Chronicles is the last book in the Old Testament, in the the last book of the Hebrew canon, I mean. So that was the last book. So that's why Jesus refers to that. Now in chapter 24, when Jesus, it starts like this: Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to this building. Do you see all these things? And he said, and on chapter 3, the disciples ask him, they take him privately and ask him, as Jesus was sitting in the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Tell us, they said, when will this happen, and what will be the signs of coming and of end of age? So again, if you see chapter 24, most of the things, chapter 24 and 25, again is in red letters. So that means it's the answer to the question. Actually, chapter 24 and 25 should be read together. It's interlinked between one another. So, but unfortunately, you can't read both of them together because it's very highly theological. So, I want you to read through this very, very carefully. So, chapter 24 and 25 is a single answer to disciples asking Jesus a private question: what are the signs? So, there are lots of things. I'm going to read some of the notes which I have written, so it will be easier. The passage is known as Olivet Discourse, which Jesus delivered in response to the disciples. The first inquiry was an attempt. So there are two inquiries there. Tell us, when will this happen? That's the first inquiry. Second, what will be the sign? So there are two things that the disciples want to know. When will this happen and what are the signs? So for this, he says, as I said, when would it take place? The second query is concerning the second coming, actually. So what are the signs? There are two different views on this, the whole topic, how this passage relates to end time events. There are two theories. Some suggest that this entire portion of Matthew relates exclusively to eschatological events. Eschatological means the coming events. Okay, they propose that chapter 24 should be divided into four parts. They're saying theologically the chapter 24 should be divided into four parts. The first half is the Great Tribulation. The second half, the end of the world. So that is the first. The first half, Great Tribulation, is Matthew 24 verses 4 to 14. The second half of the tribulation is from 15 to 28, the same chapter. The sign of Christ's coming, that is Matthew chapter 24. 29 to 31, and the illustration of the sudden end of the world, which is Matthew chapter 32 to 51. So this has to be, the chapter 24 has to be divided into four things. That's one of the ways you can read this chapter. On the other hand, there are those who believe that the thing Christ mentioned in these two chapters do not necessarily refer to eschatological events. What they are saying is just a response, and it doesn't actually tell the actual eschatological or coming events, which marks the end of the world. So they suggest that chapter 24 opens with a general description of the event that will mark the end of the world. That is chapters 24 verses 4 to 14, revealing the deceit and the rampant sin that will be evident on the earth. Christ then sets forth signs that will precede the end of the world. That is chapter 24 verses 15 to 28. These signs are divided into two categories. One, Jerusalem's destructions, and God's restrained judgment on the earth during the church age. Okay, so these are the two views. Of course, it's very highly theological, so when you refer, I'll try to give these references in the description when I publish. So today we will be reading actually chapters 24 verses 1 to 28, so you don't need to read the entire thing, but once you finish, maybe if you have time, try to read chapter 24 and 25 together. Then you will have a sort of clear eschatological idea, the events that's taking place, what are the signs that's taking place. I want you to concentrate on that. So what Jesus tells. So always remember, there are two inquiries which his disciples ask: what are the things, when will happen, when this will happen, and what are the signs. So he gives them the description. So I totally let you decide what exactly the things are. So that's it for today. So we have successfully entered into the second book of the Bible, third book, that is the Leviticus, and also Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 24, verses 1 through to 18. So thank you very much for watching. Stay safe and blessed, and I will see you tomorrow. Goodbye.